The sun rose over Beaumont, Texas on the morning of January 26, 1966, like it always did, slow, golden, and indifferent. It spilled across the flat Gulf Coast plains, gilding the rooftops of tidy bungalows, glinting off the chrome bumpers of parked Chevys, and warming the damp winter air just enough to melt the last of the morning frost. The town stirred gently. Milk bottles clinked on porches, screen doors creaked open, and the distant hum of Route 90 carried the promise of another ordinary day. Children bundled in wool coats and knitted scarves trudged toward school, their breath puffing in little clouds, their laughter sharp and bright against the quiet hum of suburban life. Beaumont was not a city of secrets, at least, not on the surface. It was a place of oil refineries and church suppers, of Friday night football and Sunday sermons, of neighbors who knew each other's names and waved from their driveways without suspicion. But beneath that placid veneer, like oil seeping through limestone, something darker had begun to stir. The Beaumont children, Jane, aged 9, Arnna, 7, and Grant, 4, woke that morning in their modest home on Dunstan Street, nestled in the middle-class neighborhood of South Park. Their mother, Nancy, moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, toast popping from the chrome toaster, eggs sizzling in a cast-iron skillet, the radio murmuring softly with the morning news. Her husband, Jim, had already left for his shift at the Gulf Oil refinery before dawn, his boots thudding down the hallway, his goodbye kiss pressed quickly to her temple. Nancy was tired, always tired, but she wore her exhaustion like a second skin, hidden beneath a crisp blouse and a calm smile. She packed lunches with care, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches cut into neat triangles, apples polished to a shine, thermoses filled with warm milk. She tied Grant's shoelaces twice because he kept fidgeting, smoothed Jane's hair with a sigh and kissed each of them on the forehead before opening the front door. "Be back by lunch," she said, her voice light but firm. "Don't wander off the beach. Stay where I can see you from the porch." "Yes, Mama," they chorused, already halfway down the walk, their small figures swallowed by the morning light. They were heading to the beach, not the wild, untamed Gulf shoreline, but the safe, supervised stretch near the municipal baths, where lifeguards stood watch and families gathered on weekends. It was only a few blocks away, a route they'd walked dozens of times before. Nancy watched them until they turned the corner, her arms crossed against the chill, then went back inside to wash the breakfast dishes. The house fell quiet. The clock ticked. Outside, a dog barked. Somewhere down the street, a car backfired. The beach that day was deceptively peaceful. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, the kind that offered no warning. The wind carried the salt tang of the ocean, mingling with the smell of popcorn from a vendor's cart and the faint chemical scent of the nearby industrial plants. Children shrieked as they chased waves. Couples strolled hand in hand. Teenagers lounged on towels. Transistor radios balanced on their knees, playing the latest hits from the Beatles and the Supremes. The Beaumont siblings played near the water's edge, building a lopsided sandcastle, their voices rising and falling in that easy rhythm only siblings share. Jane, the eldest, bossed the others gently. Arnna giggled at everything. Grant, still unsteady on his feet, toddled after them with wide, trusting eyes. A man watched them. He stood near the public restrooms, leaning against the brick wall, hands in the pockets of a long tan overcoat. He wasn't dressed like the other beachgoers, no swimsuit beneath his clothes, no towel slung over his shoulder. His hair was neatly combed, his face clean-shaven, but his eyes lingered too long. He didn't smile, didn't move, just watched. A woman pushing a stroller glanced his way and instinctively veered left. A lifeguard, scanning the crowd from his tower, frowned slightly but thought nothing of it. Strangers came to the beach all the time. Beaumont wasn't a closed town. It welcomed visitors, especially in winter when the crowds thinned and the sun felt like a gift. At 11:30 a.m., Nancy stepped onto her porch, squinting toward the beach. She didn't see them. She waited, checked her watch, called out their names once, twice, her voice carrying over the low drone of the surf. No answer. She walked down the street, her slippers flapping against the pavement, her heart beginning to flutter like a trapped bird. By noon, she was at the beach, scanning the crowd with growing panic. "Have you seen them?" she asked strangers, her voice cracking. 3 children, Jane, Arnna, Grant, blue coats, red hats. People shook their heads, offered vague reassurances. They probably went to get ice cream. Maybe they're playing hide and seek. But Nancy knew. She knew in her bones. She ran to the lifeguard station, then to the police. By 12:15 p.m., the first patrol car arrived. Then another, then a third. Officers fanned out across the beach, shouting names, questioning bystanders, checking restrooms, lifeguard huts, concession stands. Nothing. No trace. No witnesses who saw them leave. No one who remembered a struggle. Just gone. Vanished, as if the earth had swallowed them whole. The news spread like wildfire. By evening, Beaumont was a town transformed. Porch lights burned all night. Curtains twitched as neighbors peered out into the dark. Radios blared updates. The local paper scrambled to print an extra edition. 3 children missing screamed the headline, accompanied by grainy school photos. Jane's serious gaze, Arnna's gap-toothed grin, Grant's wide-eyed innocence. Volunteers gathered at the community center, organizing search parties. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades chopping the heavy air. But the Gulf offered no answers. The sand held no footprints leading away. The tide erased everything. And yet, there were whispers. A woman claimed she saw a man talking to the children near the snack bar. He had a camera, she said, wringing her hands. He took their picture, but when police asked for a description, her memory faltered. Tall, short, glasses, mustache. She couldn't say. Another witness, a teenage boy, swore he saw a dark sedan idling near the beach access road around noon. It just sat there, he said, eyes wide. Windows tinted, engine running, but no license plate, no make or model, just a shadow. Detective Frank Mallory arrived the next morning. He was a veteran of the Beaumont Police Department, a man whose face had been carved by years of bad coffee, long nights, and cases that never quite closed. His suit was rumpled, his tie loose, but his eyes sharp, gray, and weary. Missed nothing. He walked the beach alone at dawn, boots sinking into the wet sand, his breath visible in the cold air. He retraced the children's steps from Dunstan Street to the shoreline, noting every alley, every fence, every possible hiding spot. He interviewed Nancy for hours, his voice gentle but probing. She wept quietly, clutching a handkerchief, repeating the same details over and over. They were happy. They promised they'd be back by lunch. They never wandered off. Never. Mallory believed her. But belief wasn't evidence. He dug into the family's life. Jim Beaumont, hard-working, quiet, devoted to his kids. No criminal record. No debts. No enemies. Nancy active in the PTA. Well-liked. No signs of instability. The children healthy, bright, loved. No reason for them to run away. No motive for abduction that made sense. Unless someone had been watching them, planning this, waiting. Mallory requested surveillance logs from nearby businesses, reviewed bus schedules, checked train depots, cross-referenced known sex offenders in the region. Nothing matched. The case grew colder by the hour. Then, on the 3rd day, a letter arrived. It was hand-delivered to the Beaumont home, slipped under the front door in a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper typed in uneven capital letters. Your children are safe. They are being well cared for. Do not contact the police. If you do, you will never see them again. We will contact you soon. Nancy collapsed when she read it. Jim, home from work early, crumpled the note in his fist and roared in helpless fury. Mallory arrived within minutes, gloved hands carefully placing the letter into an evidence bag. He studied the paper, the typeface, the creases, amateurish, deliberately vague, designed to torment, to control. This wasn't a random act. This was personal, or calculated, or both. Mallory set up a command center in the Beaumont living room, wiretapped the phone, planted plainclothes officers in the neighborhood, issued a public plea for calm, but also for information. "If you saw anything," he said in a press conference, his voice gravelly with exhaustion, "no matter how small, tell us. A face, a car, a word overheard. It could be the key." The town held its breath. Days turned into weeks. Flyers with the children's faces blanketed telephone poles, grocery stores, gas stations. Rewards were offered. Psychics called in with visions. False leads poured in by the dozens. Children spotted in Houston, in Louisiana, in Mexico, each one chased, each one dead-ended. Hope began to curdle into dread, and still the man in the tan coat remained a ghost. Except, Mallory couldn't shake the feeling that someone in Beaumont knew more than they were saying. He started visiting neighbors again, not as a detective, but as a man seeking truth. Mrs. Edna Price, who lived 2 doors down, admitted she'd seen a strange car parked near the Beaumont house the night before the disappearance. "Black, I think," she said, stirring her tea nervously. "Or maybe dark green. It was gone by morning." But she hadn't thought much of it. People park funny sometimes. Then there was Leo Griggs, the reclusive handyman who lived in a converted garage behind the church. He'd been seen walking near the beach that morning, muttering to himself. When Mallory questioned him, Griggs grew agitated, eyes darting, fingers twitching. "I didn't touch him," he shouted. "I swear on my mama's grave." But he had no alibi, and his shed was full of old photographs, dozens of them, mostly of children, taken from a distance, at parks, at schools. Mallory's blood ran cold, but forensics found no link to the Beaumont kids. No fingerprints, no fibers, just a lonely, disturbed man with a camera and too much time. Still, the seed was planted. Paranoia took root in Beaumont. Parents kept their children indoors. Playdates were cancelled. School attendance dropped. The beach, once a symbol of community joy, became a place of fear, a wide-open grave where innocence had been stolen. Mallory worked 18-hour days, slept on a cot in his office, drank coffee until his hands shook. He replayed witness statements in his head, searching for the thread he'd missed. The camera, the sedan, the letter, the silence. And then, in early February, another letter arrived. This one was different, handwritten this time, in neat, looping cursive. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont, Jane misses her doll, the one with the blue dress. Don't worry, I gave her a new one. She's happy. Arnna sings at night. Such a sweet voice. Grant still sucks his thumb. He's learning to tie his shoes. They ask about you. I tell them you're busy. Soon, you'll understand why I had to take them. They're better off with me." The letter was signed with a single initial. Mallory's stomach turned to ice. This wasn't just an abduction. This was adoption. This was delusion. This was obsession. He ordered handwriting analysis, traced the paper stock, compared the ink to local suppliers. Nothing conclusive. But the tone, the intimacy, it suggested someone who knew the family, someone who'd watched them closely, someone who believed they were doing the right thing. The investigation shifted. Now, it wasn't just about finding the children. It was about finding a mind, a fractured, possessive mind, that saw itself as their savior. Mallory began compiling a list of people with access to the Beaumont home: babysitters, repairmen, teachers, church members, anyone who might have formed an unhealthy attachment. He re-interviewed Nancy, gently this time, asking about odd visitors, strange phone calls, gifts left on the doorstep. She remembered a man who'd come to fix the furnace last fall. Quiet, polite, lingered too long. He asked about the kids, she said, frowning. Said he had nieces their age, but she couldn't recall his name. The company had gone out of business. Then, a break. A gas station attendant on the edge of town reported seeing a man matching the tan coat description, buying candy and juice boxes on the afternoon of January 26. He had 3 kids with him, the attendant said. Looked tired, paid in cash. Drove off in a white station wagon. Mallory's pulse quickened. A vehicle. Finally, he pulled registration records for every white station wagon in Jefferson County. Hundreds of them. Cross-referenced with known offenders, missing persons reports, mental health records, days of dead ends. Until a name surfaced. Raymond Voss, a former school janitor, dismissed 2 years prior for inappropriate behavior with students, though no charges were filed. Lived alone in a trailer on the outskirts of town. Owned a 1962 Ford Country Squire, white, with a tan overcoat hanging in his closet. Mallory moved fast. He got a warrant, assembled a team, raided the trailer at dawn. What they found chilled him to the bone. Children's clothes, small, clean, neatly folded, toys, picture books. A half-finished drawing of a house with 3 stick figures, but no children, no sign of violence, just preparation, as if he'd been waiting for them. Voss denied everything. I collect things, he mumbled, eyes downcast. I like kids. I never hurt nobody. His alibi was shaky. He claimed he'd been fishing all day, alone. No witnesses. Mallory wanted to believe he was the one. But forensics found no trace of the Beaumont children in the trailer. No hair, no fingerprints, no DNA, though the science was crude in 1966. And the handwriting didn't match the second letter. Voss was released due to lack of evidence. The case stalled. Winter deepened. Rain turned the streets to mud. The flyers faded in the downpours. The reward posters curled at the edges. The town began to move on. Not because they'd forgotten, but because grief unchecked becomes unbearable. But Mallory didn't move on. He kept the case file on his desk, open. Every night he read it again. Every morning he walked the beach. And then, in March, a 3rd letter arrived. This one was shorter, colder. You should have listened. Now they're mine forever. Don't look for them. You'll only make it worse. No signature, just finality. Nancy Beaumont stopped answering the door. Jim took a second job to avoid the silence of the house. The neighbors stopped talking about it. The newspapers moved on to other stories. But Mallory knew the children were still alive, or had been when the letters were written. And someone close, someone clever, someone patient was still watching. Because on the night of April 12, 1966, Mallory's phone rang at a man's voice, calm, measured, said only, "Check the old lighthouse. You'll find what you're looking for." Then the line went dead. Mallory drove through the rain-slicked streets, siren silent, heart hammering. The abandoned lighthouse stood on a rocky outcrop south of town, long decommissioned, its beam dark for decades. He approached with his service revolver drawn, boots crunching on gravel. Inside, on a rusted metal table, lay a single item. Jane Beaumont's red winter hat, damp, stained with salt, and tucked inside the lining a Polaroid photograph. It showed all 3 children, standing in front of a plain white wall. They were wearing clean clothes. Their faces were blank, no smiles, no tears, just empty. Behind them, a shadowy figure blurred out of focus. The photo was dated February, 6 weeks after they vanished. They were alive then. But where were they now? And who was? Mallory stared at the image until his eyes burned. The storm outside raged. But the real storm, the one inside him, had only just begun. He drove back to the station, the hat in an evidence bag on the passenger seat, the photograph burning a hole in his coat pocket. Someone was playing a game, and Mallory was determined to win, even if it took him the rest of his life. The town slept, unaware, but in the quiet dark, a clock ticked. Somewhere, a child cried. Somewhere, a man smiled, and the gulf whispered secrets it would never tell. Rain drummed against the precinct windows like impatient fingers tapping glass. Detective Frank Mallory sat alone in the dim glow of his desk lamp. The Polaroid spread flat before him, the red hat resting beside it like a relic from a vanished world. The image hadn't left his mind, not for a second. 3 small faces, drained of joy, posed like mannequins in a department store window, and that shadow behind them, blurred. Yes, but deliberate. A silhouette shaped like a man, tall, shoulders squared. One hand resting lightly on Grant's shoulder, not a kidnapper's grip, a guardian's touch. That was the horror of it. This wasn't violence. This was custody. Mallory's hands trembled, not from fatigue, though he hadn't slept in 36 hours, but from the slow, sickening realization that the abductor didn't see himself as a monster. He saw himself as a father. The lighthouse had yielded nothing else. No fingerprints on the table, no tire tracks in the mud that didn't belong to Mallory's own sedan, no footprints leading away, just the hat, just the photo, a message wrapped in cruelty and care. He'd called in the entire night shift, flooded the area with cruisers, dragged the rocky shoreline. Nothing. The Gulf kept its secrets well. Now, dawn bled gray through the clouds, and Mallory faced the press. He stood before a sea of microphones, reporters huddled under umbrellas, their faces sharp with hunger. "We have reason to believe the Beaumont children were alive as of early February," he said, voice steady despite the storm inside him. "We are following every lead. We ask the public, especially anyone who may have seen a white station wagon, a man in a tan coat, or received unusual letters, to come forward. No detail is too small." He didn't mention the photo, not yet. Too volatile, too intimate. He feared copycats, feared the abductor would vanish deeper into the shadows if provoked. But someone had already seen it. Back at the station, Lieutenant Briggs, a barrel-chested man with a permanent scowl and a reputation for closing cases fast, slammed the file shut. "You're chasing ghosts, Frank. Voss is our best lead. Reopen his file. Lean on him harder." "He didn't write those letters," Mallory said quietly. "And the photo, it wasn't staged in his trailer. The wall's wrong. The lighting. Photography isn't your specialty," Briggs snapped. 3 kids are gone. The town's panicking. The mayor's breathing down my neck. I need arrests, not theories about phantom fathers." Mallory said nothing, just stared out the window at the rain-slicked street. He knew Briggs was wrong. Voss was a predator, yes, but clumsy. This was surgical, controlled, loving, evil, and that made it infinitely more dangerous. That afternoon, Mallory returned to the Beaumont house. Nancy answered the door in a faded housecoat, her eyes hollow, her hair unwashed. She'd aged 10 years in 10 weeks. Jim stood behind her, arms crossed, jaw clenched. They'd read the news. They knew about the photo. "Can we see it?" Nancy whispered. Mallory hesitated, then nodded. He laid the Polaroid on their kitchen table, the same table where peanut butter sandwiches had once been cut into triangles. Nancy let out a soft, broken sound, like a whimper caught in her throat. She reached for it, then pulled her hand back, as if burned. "They look clean," Jim said hoarsely. "Fed, not hurt. But they're not smiling," Nancy said, tears spilling over. Jane always smiled for pictures, even when she was mad. Arnna would have been jumping. Grant, he'd be clinging to Jane's leg. She looked up at Mallory, her voice cracking. "They're scared. They're pretending to be okay. So we won't worry." Mallory's chest tightened. She was right. This wasn't reassurance. It was performance. The abductor was showing them what they wanted to see, just enough to keep hope alive, just enough to keep them quiet. "Who is he?" Jim demanded, slamming a fist on the table. "Who the hell takes children and plays house with them?" Mallory had no answer, but he had a new angle. That night he pulled every school record within a 50-mile radius. Every teacher, janitor, bus driver, cafeteria worker who'd had contact with the Beaumont children. He cross-referenced with mental health hospital discharges, military veterans with psychological evaluations, even local artists. Anyone who might possess the patience, the solitude, the warped sense of purpose to do this. Days bled into nights. Then a name surfaced. Reverend Elias Crow, pastor of the Grace Fellowship Church, just 3 blocks from the Beaumont home. Mallory remembered him vaguely from the early days of the investigation. A soft-spoken man in his late 40s, with gentle eyes and a calm demeanor. He'd offered counseling to the Beaumonts, organized prayer vigils, distributed flyers, seemed above suspicion. But something nagged at Mallory. He pulled Crow's file. Ordained in 1958, served in a small congregation in Louisiana before moving to Beaumont in 1961. No criminal record, but a notation from a Louisiana hospital. Admitted 1959, nervous exhaustion. Discharged after 6 weeks. Vague, but notable. Mallory dug deeper. He visited the church under the guise of seeking spiritual guidance. The building was modest. White clapboard, stained glass windows depicting lambs and doves. Inside, it smelled of lemon oil and old hymnals. Crow greeted him warmly, offered coffee, listened with patient eyes as Mallory spun a story about losing faith after a friend's tragedy. "You're not alone in your doubt, Detective," Crow said, stirring sugar into his cup. "God tests us. Sometimes the path is dark, but he always provides." Mallory studied him. The hands, long-fingered, clean, steady. The voice, smooth, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The way his eyes lingered a fraction too long when Mallory mentioned children. "Your congregation. You have many families?" Mallory asked casually. "Blessedly so," Crow smiled. "Children are the purest vessels of grace. I often say they see the world as it should be, not as it is." A chill ran down Mallory's spine. Later, he checked church records. Crow had baptized all 3 Beaumont children, had visited their home for dinner twice in 1965, had given Jane a Bible for her 8th birthday, and, crucially, he owned a 1963 Ford Country Squire. White. Mallory's pulse quickened. He obtained a warrant for Crow's home, a small parsonage behind the church, and executed it at dawn. What he found stopped him cold. Not toys, not children's clothes, but photographs. Hundreds of them, tacked to corkboards, filed in albums, stacked in shoeboxes, all of children. Not just his congregation. Children from the beach, from the park, from schoolyards, taken with a telephoto lens, candid, intimate, unseen. And among them 3 photos of the Beaumont children, taken weeks before they vanished. Jane walking home from school, backpack bouncing. Arnna swinging at the playground, hair flying. Grant sitting on the porch steps, sucking his thumb. Each labeled in neat script. Jane, innocent. Arnna, joyful. Grant, pure. Mallory's blood turned to ice. This wasn't obsession. This was selection. He confronted Crow in the parsonage study. The Reverend didn't deny the photos. "I document God's creations," he said calmly, hands folded on his desk. "Is it a sin to admire beauty? Did you take them to the beach that day?" Mallory asked, voice low. "No," Crow said. "I was preparing Sunday's sermon. Alone. No witnesses. God was my witness." Mallory leaned forward. "We found a Polaroid. Your handwriting matches the second letter, the one about Jane's doll." Crow's eyes flickered. Just once, a micro-expression of surprise. Then calm returned. "You're mistaken, detective. My handwriting is quite distinct." But Mallory had the forensic report, the loops, the slant, the pressure on the downstrokes. It was close, not identical, but close enough to warrant suspicion. He arrested Crow on suspicion of kidnapping. The town erupted. Headlines screamed, "Pastor held in Beaumont, disappearance." Crow's congregation rallied, calling it a witch hunt. Others whispered that it made sense. How else could someone vanish 3 children in broad daylight? But then, the evidence crumbled. Crow's alibi held. A parishioner confirmed seeing him in the church office at 11:45 a.m. on January 26. The station wagon had been parked in the driveway all day, verified by 2 neighbors, and the handwriting expert, under pressure, admitted the match was probable but not conclusive. Worse, no trace of the children was found in the parsonage. No fibers, no hair, no hidden rooms. Just photos, just devotion. Crow was released. Mallory stood on the courthouse steps, rain soaking his coat, as reporters shouted questions. He felt the weight of failure like a stone in his gut. He was missing something. Something obvious. That night, he returned to the beach alone. The wind howled off the Gulf. Waves crashed against the shore like fists. He walked the exact path the children would have taken from Dunstan Street to the municipal baths. He counted his steps, watched the angles, imagined their voices, and then he saw it. A gap in the fence behind the snack bar. Not large, just enough for a small child to slip through. Overgrown with weeds, hidden from view. Mallory pushed through. Behind it, a narrow alley leading to a service road. And there, faint but unmistakable tire marks in the dried mud. Old but preserved by recent rain. He followed the road. It led to an abandoned auto shop, its windows boarded, its sign rusted. The building had been vacant for months, but the back door was slightly ajar. Mallory drew his gun. Inside, the air was thick with dust and motor oil. Tools lay scattered, but in the corner, a cot, a kerosene lamp, empty food tins, and on the floor, a child's blue mitten. Arnna. Mallory's breath caught. He searched the building inch by inch. In a rusted filing cabinet, he found it. A journal, not dated, but filled with entries in that same looping cursive. January 20. Saw them at the market. Jane held her mother's hand like a little lady. Grant kept pointing at the candy. My heart ached. They deserve better. January 24. Watched them from the oak tree. Nancy scolded Arnna for splashing in puddles. Such a harsh voice. They need gentleness. January 26. Today is the day. God has shown me the way. They will be mine. They will be safe. February 3. They are adjusting. Jane cries at night, but she's strong. Arnna sings to Grant. I read them psalms. They call me uncle. Soon they will call me father. Mallory's hands shook as he turned the pages. The final entry. They must never go back. The world is cruel. I will protect them forever, even if it means disappearing. No name, but a sketch on the last page. A lighthouse. Not the one south of town. A different one. Mallory rushed back to the station, pulling maritime maps, lighthouse registries. There was only one other decommissioned lighthouse within driving distance. Sabine Pass, 70 miles east, on the Louisiana border. He called for backup, got a state trooper on the line. Then, without waiting, he jumped in his car and drove through the night. Rain turned to fog as he crossed into Louisiana. The road narrowed. Trees closed in. The lighthouse stood on a lonely spit of land, surrounded by marsh and brackish water. Its white paint was peeling, its lantern room dark. Mallory approached on foot, gun drawn. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale, cold, and then a sound. A child's voice, singing. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mallory's heart stopped. He followed the sound up the spiral staircase. On the second floor, In a room lined with blankets and books sat Arnna Beaumont, alone. She looked up, eyes wide, then burst into tears. "Mama," she whispered. Mallory dropped to his knees. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now." "But where were Jane and Grant?" Arnna shook her head, sobbing. "He took them away, said I was too loud, said I'd get them caught." "Who, Arnna? Who took you?" "The man with the kind eyes," she said, trembling. "He said he loved us, said we were his angels." Mallory radioed for an ambulance, for backup, for everything. As he held Arnna, rocking her gently, he noticed something on the windowsill. A note. "You found one, but the others are beyond your reach. They belong to me now." Mallory crushed the note in his fist. He'd been played. Again. Arnna was dehydrated, malnourished, but physically unharmed. Psychologically shattered. She spoke in fragments. Remembered a white car, a long drive, a house with no windows, a man who read to them every night, who called them his lambs, but no names, no addresses, just kindness wrapped in chains. The media frenzy reignited. "Beaumont girl found alive," screamed the headlines. Hope surged, then died just as fast, because Jane and Grant were still missing. Mallory interrogated Arnna gently over days with child psychologists present. She described the man as tall, soft-spoken, smelled like soap. He wore glasses sometimes, sometimes not. He had a scar on his hand, like a lightning bolt, she said. Mallory circulated the description. Hundreds of tips poured in. One stood out. A man matching the description had been seen renting a cabin near Toledo Bend Reservoir 2 weeks after the disappearance, paid in cash, kept to himself, had 2 small children with him. Mallory and a task force descended on the area. They found the cabin abandoned, but inside, a child's drawing. Jane's handwriting. "I miss Mama. Please come get us. He says you don't want us anymore." And a train ticket stub. Houston. Dated March. Mallory raced to Houston. He combed bus stations, train depots, flophouses, showed photos, asked questions. At Union Station, a ticket clerk remembered a man with 2 quiet children boarding a train to El Paso. "Paid cash," the clerk said. Didn't say much. The boy kept holding his sister's hand. El Paso. Mallory flew there. Another dead end. The trail went cold. Months passed. Then, in August 1966, a body washed ashore near Galveston. A young girl, blonde hair, blue dress. Mallory's stomach dropped. But it wasn't Jane, just another tragedy. The case grew quieter. Arnna lived with her parents, but she never spoke of the man again. She flinched at loud noises, refused to go near the beach, woke screaming in the night. Jim Beaumont drank more. Nancy stopped leaving the house. Mallory worked the case alone now. Briggs had reassigned him to burglary detail. "Let it go, Frank," he'd said. "You're destroying yourself." But Mallory couldn't, because every night he dreamed of that Polaroid. 3 blank faces, 1 shadow, and the initial. He started visiting cemeteries, not for the dead, for the living. He pulled death records, birth records, marriage licenses, and then buried in a stack of old church bulletins. He found it. A name, Robert Ellery, former deacon at Grace Fellowship, dismissed in 1964 for emotional instability, moved out of state, but his mother still lived in Beaumont, on Magnolia Street. Mallory knocked on her door one rainy afternoon. An elderly woman answered, frail, eyes clouded with cataracts. "Robert," she whispered. "He hasn't been home in years. Poor boy. Always loved children. After his wife and the baby, he just broke." Mallory's breath caught. "What happened to his wife?" "Died in childbirth," the woman said, tears welling. "Both of them, 10 years ago. Robert never recovered. He used to say, God took what he loved most, so he'd take what God loved most in return. Mallory's blood ran cold. He asked for a photo. The woman shuffled inside and returned with a faded picture. A young man, soft eyes, neat hair, a scar on his right hand shaped like a lightning bolt. Mallory recognized him instantly, not from the beach, but from the background of a security photo at the Beaumont train station taken the day after the children vanished. Robert Ellery had been there, buying a one-way ticket to Mexico. Mallory contacted the FBI. They issued an international alert, but Mexico was vast, lawless in places, and Ellery, he was smart, patient. He'd planned this for years. Mallory realized then, the letters, the photos, the lighthouse drop, it wasn't just to taunt. It was to document his new family, to prove to himself and to the Beaumonts that he'd succeeded, that he was a father. And somewhere, across the border, in a small house with white walls and barred windows, Jane and Grant Beaumont were living a lie, calling a monster daddy. Mallory stood on the beach one last time that year. The sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. He placed Jane's red hat on the sand. Let the tide take it. He knew, with a certainty that hollowed him out, that he would never see them again. But he would never stop looking. Because justice wasn't just about catching monsters. It was about remembering the light they tried to extinguish. And in Beaumont, that light still flickered. In a little girl who sang at night. In a mother who kept 3 plates set at dinner. In a detective who refused to close the file. The storm had passed, but the silence was louder than ever. 59 years later, the Gulf still whispered. The beach at Beaumont looked much the same curve of sand, same low tide lapping at the shore, same distant hum of industry on the horizon. But time had layered the place with ghosts. Tourists snapped photos near the municipal baths, unaware that beneath their feet, the earth remembered screams that were never spoken. The Dunstan Street house had been repainted twice, sold 3 times, but locals still called it the Beaumont Place. No family stayed long. They said the walls held echoes, that on quiet nights you could hear children laughing, then stopping mid-breath. Frank Mallory never retired. He worked cold cases until his hands shook too much to hold a pen, until his eyes blurred over files, until the department gently suggested he step back. But he never closed the Beaumont file, not officially, not in his heart. He kept it in a locked drawer at home, wrapped in oilcloth, next to his service revolver and a faded photo of Jane, Arnna and Grant smiling, alive before the world broke. He died in 2012, at 84 in his sleep. The file was found on his nightstand. His last journal entry, scrawled in shaky script. I saw him in my dream again. Robert Ellery. He was old, grey, but his eyes, still kind, still wrong. He said, "They're happy, Frank. Isn't that what matters?" I woke up screaming. The case went dormant. Then, in 2024, a breakthrough no one expected. Not from a tip, not from a deathbed confession, but from a landfill outside Monterrey, Mexico. A construction crew digging for a new housing development unearthed a rusted metal trunk, buried 10 feet deep. Inside, children's clothes, mildewed books, a broken music box, and a stack of photographs. Dozens of them, all showing the same 2 children, older now, but unmistakable. Jane, with her serious eyes, now shadowed by something weary. Grant, no longer a toddler, but a thin boy with hollow cheeks, standing stiffly beside a man. The man, grey-haired, glasses, a scar visible on his right hand, posed with them in front of cinder-block walls, desert landscapes, a small adobe house. In every photo, his arm rested protectively around their shoulders. In every photo, the children's faces were blank, obedient, empty. On the back of one photo, in faded ink, "My family, 1978. They finally call me father." The Mexican authorities contacted the FBI. DNA testing confirmed it. The clothes contained hair follicles matching the Beaumont family lineage. The case exploded back to life. In Beaumont, now a city of strip malls and traffic lights, the old wound reopened. News vans rolled in. Documentaries were greenlit. Arnna, now a grandmother, living quietly in Tyler, was tracked down. She refused interviews, but she wept when shown the photos. They never came home, she whispered to her daughter. He kept them forever. The FBI launched Operation Lighthouse. They traced property records in northern Mexico, cross-referenced with U.S. immigration logs, utility bills, medical records. It took months, but they found it. A small compound near Saltillo, abandoned. Inside, they found more evidence. A birth certificate forged, listing Robert Ellery as father of Elena and Mateo Ellery. School records from a private Catholic academy. Medical files showing routine checkups, and one entry from 1983. Patient Mateo fractured wrist. Claims fell off bike. No further inquiry. And in a locked drawer, a final journal. Ellery's handwriting, now spidery with age. 1989. Elena asked about her real mother today. I told her Nancy didn't want her, that she gave her to me because she was too weak to be a mother. She cried. But she believed. 1990. Mateo tried to run. Caught him at the bus station. Brought him back. He doesn't try anymore. 1991. My heart is failing. God is calling me home. But who will protect them? The world is still cruel. I cannot leave them alone. Final entry. Forgive me, Lord, but I cannot let them go. Not even to you. Beneath it, a single line. Underlined 3 times. They are buried where the wind sings. The FBI scoured the property. Behind the house, beneath a mesquite tree, they found 2 small graves. No markers, just disturbed earth. Forensic anthropologists exhumed the remains. DNA confirmed. Jane and Grant Beaumont. They had died, Jane at 34, Grant at 29. Cause of death, undetermined. No signs of trauma, but toxicology revealed long-term sedative use consistent with control, not care. Ellery had drugged them, kept them docile, and when his heart gave out, he took them with him, not in violence, in silence, in the belief that death was safer than freedom. The news shattered what was left of Beaumont's soul. Nancy Beaumont had died in 1998, never knowing. Jim passed in 2005, still setting 3 plates at dinner. Arnna, now 70, stood at the edge of the excavation site in Saltillo, wrapped in a shawl, staring at the empty graves. She didn't speak, just placed a single red ribbon, faded, frayed, on the earth. Jane's favorite. Back in Texas, the FBI closed the case. Robert Ellery's body was never found, presumed buried elsewhere, or cremated, or lost to the desert. But justice was complicated. He hadn't raped them, hadn't beaten them publicly. He'd fed them, clothed them, given them names, a warped, monstrous love. But love nonetheless in his mind. The world debated, was he a kidnapper, a delusional savior, a ghost who stole childhoods and called it grace? Only the dead knew. But in Beaumont, something shifted. The town held a memorial, not for the tragedy, but for the truth. On January 26, 2025, 59 years to the day, they gathered on the beach, not with anger, with remembrance. A bronze plaque was unveiled near the municipal baths, in memory of Jane Beaumont, 9th Arnna Beaumont. Grant Beaumont, lost, found, never forgotten. Arnna stood at the front, leaning on a cane, her eyes dry now. She placed 3 red hats on the sand, new ones stitched by her own hands. The wind caught them, lifted them slightly, then let them settle. A child's voice piped up from the crowd. Did they ever get to come home? Arnna turned, looked at the gulf, then back at the child. Yes, she said softly. Today they did. That night, in a quiet room at the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, the Beaumont file was finally closed. Not with a bang, with a whisper. The last page held a single sentence, typed by a young detective who'd grown up hearing the legend. Case resolved. Victims laid to rest. Perpetrator deceased. Truth recovered. But in the archive basement, where dust motes danced in slanted light, Frank Mallory's original file remained. And on the inside cover, in his own hand, a line he'd written in 1966 and never erased. Some monsters don't roar. They tuck you in at night. The gulf kept singing. The wind carried secrets. But in Beaumont, for the first time in 59 years, the silence felt like peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because it was finally shared. And in that sharing, the children were no longer just victims. They were remembered. Jane, the protector. Arnna, the survivor. Grant, the innocent. Their names echoed not in fear, but in love. And somewhere beyond the tides, beyond the years, beyond the lies of a broken man who thought he could rewrite destiny, they were finally free. The camera pulls back. Over the beach, over the town, over the graves in Mexico, now marked with simple stones. The sun sets, the stars emerge, and the world turns. But the story is done.